Jody Tidwell. I'm going to talk about hypothermia in the neonate. Our objectives for today's lesson is to classify hypothermia as mild, moderate, and severe. We're going to identify the body's methods of heat production and heat loss. We're going to discuss consequences of cold stress in the neonate and describe methods of temperature support and strategies to maintain a neutral thermal environment. The World Health Organization classifies neonatal hypothermia as mild, being 36 to 36.4 degrees Celsius or 96.8 to 97.5 degrees Fahrenheit. Moderate is 32 to 35.9 degrees Celsius or 89.6 to 96.6 degrees Fahrenheit. And severe hypothermia is classified as anything less than 32 degrees Celsius or less than 89.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Some methods of heat production are peripheral vasoconstriction, increased muscle flexion and activity, and brown fat metabolism. When human beings get cold, one of the body's first mechanisms to generate heat is to constrict the blood vessels in the arms and legs. This helps to keep blood in the core of the body and prevents heat loss from the skin surface. Although this helps to conserve heat, prolonged periods of peripheral vasoconstriction reduce the amount of oxygen available to the tissue. In the adult, heat is produced through shivering, but infants have a poor ability to shiver. Rather than shivering, infants increase activity through flexion and movement, which generates muscular warmth. Flexion also helps to decrease the body surface area. Premature and sick infants may be unable to flex in response to cold stimuli, the way that mature infants can. The premature infant has poor muscle tone and primarily lies with his extremities extended. The premature infant has a very large surface area to body mass ratio. In other words, the large area is exposed to the environment, this can result in rapid heat loss. The third mechanism of heat production is brown fat metabolism. This process is initiated in the hypothalamus by the way of the sympathetic nervous system. Brown fat is located around the kidneys, adrenal glands, the mediastinum, subscapular and axillary areas, and is very limited in premature infants. Storage of brown fat occurs primarily during the third trimester of pregnancy. So remember, the more premature the infant, the less brown fat is stored. Norepinephrine is released at the brown fat site as a result of cold stress. When norepinephrine is released, it causes the release of free fatty acids. One consequence due to the release of free fatty acids is that it will compete with bilirubin for albumin binding sites. This increases the risk of hyperbilirubinemia and possible kernicterus. Of the three methods of heat production, brown fat metabolism is the one most utilized by the newborn. Some methods of heat loss are conduction, convection, evaporation, and radiation. Conduction is the transfer of heat between two solid objects that are in direct contact. An example of this would be between the skin of an infant and a cooler object, such as the caregiver's hand or a temperature probe. Convection is the transfer of heat between a solid surface, such as the infant, and either moving air or liquid around the infant. Evaporation is loss of heat through the energy used in the conversion of water to its gaseous state, and radiation is the transfer of heat between a solid surface that are not in direct contact. An example of this would be between the isolette and the outside window. Cold stress in the term newborn includes pulmonary vasoconstriction. When the term newborn becomes cold, a sequence of physiologic responses begins to occur. When cold stress is detected by the body's peripheral and core temperature sensors, signals are sent to the hypothalamus. This activates the release of norepinephrine. In response, norepinephrine causes pulmonary vasoconstriction. This leads to a greater possibility of right to left shunting, which leads to hypoxemia. Norepinephrine also causes peripheral vasoconstriction. When prolonged and coupled with increased oxygen consumption, this leads to hypoxia as well. An increased metabolic rate can lead to increased oxygen consumption and increased glucose consumption. Cold stress in the preterm newborn. The preterm newborn is at much greater risk for developing hypothermia for many reasons. These reasons include a larger surface area to body mass ratio, decreased amounts of insulating fat. Premature infants have thinner and immature skin with the blood vessels near the surface. They have poor muscle tone, little to no brown fat, and also due to the amniotic fluid loss equals evaporative heat loss in the preterm infant. Preterm infants have limited pulmonary vasoconstriction, peripheral vasoconstriction, and glycogen stores. Therefore, effects of cold stress may occur more rapidly and with greater severity. Some consequences of cold stress include hypoglycemia, acidosis, and hypoxia. When the infant is cold stressed, the metabolic rate increases to produce heat. If the infant's metabolic rate is increased, glycogen stores and blood glucose are used up much faster. This predisposes the infant to hypoglycemia episodes. Remember, the body needs glucose to meet its energy needs. When the infant is cold stressed, brown fat is converted to heat and free fatty acids. The fatty acids and lactic acid are formed during muscular activity by the breakdown of glycogen. They are then dumped into the bloodstream, causing a lower blood pH and metabolic acidosis. Acidosis also causes vasoconstriction of the pulmonary blood vessels, resulting in low blood oxygen levels. Extra oxygen is needed when the infant is cold in order to produce heat. A cold infant with normal lungs will increase his respiratory rate in order to get extra oxygen. If the infant has diseased lungs, he may not be able to get enough oxygen to maintain brain and body functions. Infants may show signs of respiratory distress such as grunting, retracting, nasal flaring, and tachypnea. An infant does not have to be severely cold stressed to develop these consequences. Some infants demonstrate these consequences even if their temperature drops only 1 to 2 degrees. Remember, cold stress results in the release of norepinephrine leading to vasoconstriction. This reduces heat loss and initiates heat production. Increasing metabolic rates cause an increase in utilization of glucose stores. The infant uses anaerobic metabolism to produce heat, resulting in lactic acid production and hypoxia. The end results are metabolic acidosis, hypoglycemia, and death if hypothermia continues. Maintenance of temperature stability should be focused on preventative measures. We always want to dry the infant thoroughly at a delivery and remove any wet towels. Applying caps and swaddling with warm blankets. We can provide skin to skin with the mother if the infant is stable. We always want to take the infant to a pre-warmed radiant warmer at delivery. And in the extremely low birth weight infant, we can use plastic wrap. And in this case, we would not dry the infant. The purpose here is to inhibit evaporative heat loss. The neutral thermal environment is defined as the range of thermal environment in which the body temperature is normal, oxygen and caloric consumption is minimal, and the least amount of metabolic energy is expended. This varies based on the infant's age and weight. Therefore, it is our goal as caregivers to maintain an environment in which an infant does not expend a lot of energy to maintain the temperature within normal range. In conclusion, prior to delivery, infants are in an environment that maintains a stable body temperature. The infant's temperature may drop several degrees as he or she passes from a warm, protected uterine environment to that of a cool delivery room. Frequent or prolonged heat-losing episodes in infants who have limited heat-producing and conserving resources may lead to cold stress. Cold stress, in turn, may lead to physiological changes that can compromise the infant. Protecting babies against heat loss improves survival and decreases metabolic demand.